Now, please pause the video and memorize these rules. The colors that most often need correction and their corresponding correctors. Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Nechaeva. Thank you for purchasing this private course on color theory. Let's go over the definitions. It's boring, but it's important. About color. Chromatic colors are all colors that have a colorful hue. Achromatic colors are all the colors in the black and white range. Primary colors are the source of all other colors. They make up all the colors in the chromatic palette. This whole vast variety, that's what they are. It's like Adam and Eve for humans, but the ancestors of all colors are red, yellow, and blue. Secondary colors are a mixture of 2 of the 3 primary colors. I'll show you this on the palette. Our primary colors, I'll mark them here first too, so it's clear and easy to see, so you remember. The ancestors of them all primary colors. Now, if you combine red and yellow, then we'll get the color orange. Its level of brightness is adjusted by having more red or more yellow, so that's about the shades. Purple, for example, is red and blue. And green is blue and yellow. Same thing. Oh, and speaking of brightness, color brightness is whether it's, well, if it's pure or if it has impurities. Or, for instance, if we take green, it's made of blue and yellow, as you've gathered. And the more blue there is in it, the more it becomes like aquamarine or turquoise. The more green there is in it, the more it shifts right into just pure green. Any color has its own characteristics. The first and most important is brightness. Brightness is the degree of color purity, meaning the amount of other color impurities in it. Color, Tom. It's essential to distinguish between the concepts of tone and undertone. Tone is the primary color, while undertone is an impurity of another color added to the primary. Due to the difference in undertones, well, overall, different shades of the same color are formed. Well, for example, yellow-green. The main tone is green, the undertone is yellow. Another very important characteristic is temperature. Color, as you know, or maybe you don't, color can be cool, which is when it has more blue, when it's closer to the blue range on the palette, or warm, when it's closer to red. Colors can have different temperatures, even relative to each other. That is, blue can be cooler, and as strange as it sounds, warmer if it has a little bit of green in it. And the same color can be warm if you compare it with cooler colors. Or cool if you compare it with warmer colors. The general rule is the more red and yellow, the warmer, the more blue, the cooler. The same pigment or color against a warmer shade will seem cooler, and against a cooler one, warmer. Look at this color and at the same color against a blue background. Do you see the difference? Another important characteristic is contrast, especially in tattooing. In our case, it's the density of the pigment placement in the skin. How do you get a brown color? Brown. We can get by mixing yellow, red, and blue in equal proportions. I'll show that now too. Yellow. Red. Blue. It turns out to be a simple brown color like this. The degree of its brightness is also adjusted by the amount. Watercolor paint is very transparent, so the colors here are transparent. And the second version of brown is just black, to which we add red and yellow. The more red and yellow, the lighter and warmer the color becomes. the less black it has. And overall, they are similar. Even this one might look warmer. And by the way, for those thinking about creating their own mixes, the same principle works in mixes. So you can create them, try-in, mix-in paints, selecting ones as similar as possible to those I'm painting with now in tattoo mixes. There are brown mixes based on black. It turns out to be about 1 drop of, say, black, 2 or 3 of red, and 2 or 3 of yellow. You choose these shades yourself just by buying a bunch of different paints. And brown. There are many ready-made browns, so in principle, mixing them yourself doesn't always even make sense. Shades of brown can be obtained by changing the amount of ingredients. For example, to get light brown, you need more yellow. And to get chestnut, just add more red. We created brown by mixing standard colors, but this brown is, well, quite neutral. If I need a vibrant brown, then it turns out I just need more parts of red and blue to be present in my brown color. It becomes darker like this, but it's a bit closer. It brings this dark color closer to the danger zone. There's a lot of blue in there, and you have to be, well, careful when you're mixing your own blends. But it's chestnut, see? It has a red base, and you can adjust the saturation, for example, by the density of the application itself, specifically the amount of pigment implanted into the skin. And light brown means a color that has a lot of yellow in it. So I can even just add quite a bit more yellow to this color, and it becomes more of a safe bet. There it is. It ends up having a yellowish base. In principle, you can work with this color on almost all light brown-haired clients, also adjusting the saturation simply by the density of the application. So you understand, there's a large group of light brown-haired clients, and for them, you work with shades of cool or warm light brown, and you adjust the brightness. And a large group of chestnut-haired clients, so to speak, meaning people like me, both darker and a bit lighter. With these clients, you work with pigments that have a red base. The same goes for the color black. With a mix made from black, and play around with it, adjust its saturation. That is, if you make it more high contrast. First, I'll make it more saturated and a bit darker. This forms the base for clients with dark hair or chestnut hair. And as soon as I add twice as much yellow paint to it, just like before, but this time making sure to really double the amount, it'll become quite safe again, just as we expected. And it will take on that light brown shade. So by adjusting the amount of red and yellow, you'll get a brown color for brunettes and a lighter brown color leaning towards light brown for blondes. In color theory, the laws of arithmetic and equations apply, but everything works only through addition. We can't exactly subtract a color from paints that are already mixed. For example, brown is yellow, red, and blue, while blue is brown minus yellow and minus red. If you had a special pump to extract only those colors from the mix, you could use that equation, but in practice, it's impossible. And we can only add the colors that we have as raw materials. Applying math, we see that brown can also be obtained using secondary colors. For example, brown is orange, red plus yellow, remember? Purple, red plus blue, and green is blue plus yellow. We get a simple equation. Brown is 2 reds, 2 blues, and 2 yellows. And now the magic begins. We can turn any of the secondary colors into brown. Purple, red plus blue, becomes brown if you add yellow to it. Purple consists of red and blue, remember? Green, which is yellow plus blue, becomes brown if you add red to it. Orange, which is yellow plus red, becomes brown if you add blue to it. You're probably thinking how great it would be if you didn't have to remember these silly rules. Remembering these rules isn't necessary if you have a calculator to determine the color correctors that lead to brown. This is Itten's simple color wheel. However, using it exactly by picking colors directly opposite each other to correct the base won't work. Because in our case, all colors are distorted by the color and thickness of the skin. For instance, in Itten's color wheel, blue shades lie directly opposite red ones. You can't work with blue. We most often work with green shades. And green, as you remember, is blue plus yellow. So it's always a bit warmer than the colors you were using. How is this knowledge applicable to permanent makeup in principle? Well, knowing these simple rules, you can now correct eyebrow disasters by shifting them from purple, red, orange, or green. So a client comes to you with pink or purple eyebrows, or maybe blue ones. Can the color be fixed? There are 3 ways in total. These are correctors, which are the missing colors we can use to change the base color. There's the laser, which is a device for removing pigment from the skin. It's a complex, long process that takes up to 6 months or sometimes even longer. And there are removers, which are liquids applied to the skin that pull out some of the pigment after healing. Now, correctors, let me remind you that these are colors that, when added to the original, result in brown. In what cases do we work with correctors? If there are contraindications to the laser, or if the laser doesn't react to the pigment, as happens with green or flesh-toned colors. If the remover didn't help, or if there are contraindications to it. If the shape meets quality criteria and is actually good, but the color is undesirable. And remember, if there are multiple colors in the eyebrows, you'll need to use multiple correctors. Now, please pause the video and memorize these rules. The colors most often needing correction and their corresponding correctors. Depending on the client's hair color, by the way, which is very important. We can turn any of the secondary colors into brown. For example, I'll take purple. The purple color that everyone's afraid of, and clients come in for corrections with this color. Sometimes they come to you with these strange colors on their brows, and you're forced to work with them. How do you change it? I'll add a little more blue now. So here's purple. Purple, as you remember, is red plus blue. I just showed you that by mixing. You add yellow to it, and it becomes, look, it's like magic. Magic, it turns brown, a really beautiful brown color. And you could even say it's leaning towards light brown. So you can take purple eyebrows, even on a fair-skinned client, and turn them into a nice, natural light brown. Just remember the rule not to use a corrector. On clean skin, you should only work over the color you're correcting. I've seen green eyebrows. They sometimes turn green after laser treatment. The shade of green can vary. It can be yellow green or even a bright emerald green. Look at the color and, again, only work over it. The only thing is, if these brows were laser removed, they're likely the wrong shape. And think 10 times before you correct green brows with a bad shape, because you'll basically just set that color even more. To fix green, we just need to add red. Look, there it goes. It's like magic, and the green turned brown. Depending on the amount of red, I took a bit more here. It even became a color suitable for brunettes. If you're correcting green eyebrows, you should do a first pass with red, see how it changes, and then double the intensity on the second pass to ensure that at least some of that color remains after healing. Keep that in mind. Orange eyebrows. After permanent pigments, a lot of orange eyebrows come in with varying levels of brightness. And you'll definitely have to work with them. Orange is actually quite easy to correct. Opposite red-orange colors on the Itten color wheel are actually cool turquoise and blue shades. Of course, we won't be using those colors as correctors. All correctors that work in the skin to change a color to brown are green. That is, an army green, a muddy green. It's often called arm green, for example. It's more of a brownish green. This is the color that will help you shift it to a brown for brunettes, a dark brown. And, well, I've taken green here now. I'll fix it, change it. So here I get this kind of light brown color because the red wasn't very saturated. But if you take a brighter one, I've only seen such bright eyebrows maybe a couple of times, so saturated and bright. Then it should be a kind of brownish, really green color. And we get a brown color, one that's closer to the shades needed for brunettes. But if you take an olive color, which is a yellow-green, then you'll shift the orange color into a shade that's lighter for light brown-haired clients. Because in the end, after healing, you usually need, well, naturally different shades, not just plain brown. It can be both dark and light, and not all colors can be shifted into a light shade for blondes, of course. The most unpleasant color to correct is a kind of cool pink. It shows up quite often, and it's difficult to correct. In this pink, we have red and actually a little bit of blue. You understand, right, what pink consists of? So it's like an almost purple. So we take a color. Oh, look, poured in parks. I'll take a yellow color and also a little bit of green. So a yellow-green color will allow you to shift these pink eyebrows into a light brown shade, which will then be easy to cover with any color during correction. The only thing is, don't overdo the green. So the base is really yellow. There should be a lot of yellow in this mix to get a safe combination of these colors. So yellow like this. There are 3 parts, say, of yellow and 1 part of green. And you get a more or less safe color because we've neutralized this cool blue base. It becomes a warm light brown, a very dangerous color. And I always try to change such colors with a laser first because it's the easiest and most ethical action towards the client. And only then, when something is impossible due to contraindications, do I change the colors with correctors? So we've got different shades of brown that we've corrected. Many pigment lines have corrector colors. And many artists ask, look, here's the color, do I need to add a corrector to it? The same applies to mixes of tattoo pigments. For example, in our pigments, you don't need to add a corrector at all if you work confidently at the right depth and follow the rules. The colors are completely standalone. You just have to adjust the saturation by the density of the pigment placement in the skin. You only add a corrector if you see very, say, cool, thin skin, and you know your technique is lacking, and you might go too deep, so you're playing it safe in advance, for example. But generally, correctors are used when a mistake has already been made and you need to fix it. So, for instance, in our mixes, I don't recommend mixing them together too actively or adding correctors beforehand because, well, they're not needed. With proper work, they're basically unnecessary. A corrector is a color that changes the pigment. And say, if you add some red-brown corrector to your pigment, your eyebrows might just heal red because it's not needed there. I'll say it again. So be careful with correctors. You shouldn't use them. Some artists see correctors as some kind of magic wand. They think, I'll just take a bunch of these red correctors and add them to all the pigments and they'll never turn blue or get cool and so on. You shouldn't do that because I've just shown you a certain amount of ingredients in the brown color. And if yellow predominates, for example, then your eyebrows will heal lighter. It's just, well, not a big deal. Yeah, lighter. It won't be enough brightness. But if there's too much red, a client might come back to you with these clay red eyebrows that they don't want at all. And then, during the touch-up session, you'll have to add a corrector color to neutralize that shade. So work with the cleanest colors possible so you can really understand, see, and track how they heal after a month. And only then, with a conscious understanding of a certain color and a certain skin type, should you maybe very rarely warm it up a bit right away. But don't just do it like that for every single client. We will definitely develop and publish a detailed video course with step-by-step instructions on working with correctors. Working with correctors actually requires skills. Serious ones. You might not get it right the first time. So practice by mixing colors on a palette. To start with, just to really understand the principle. And now a short test. You have 10 seconds to answer each of the questions. If a client comes to you with purple eyebrows, According to color theory, they can be turned brown by tattooing with a special corrector pigment. What color of corrector pigment would you choose? If a client comes to you with pink eyebrows, what color corrector would you choose? A client had green eyebrows. It happens. Which corrector pigment should you choose? If you answered incorrectly just now during the speed round to even one of these questions, re-watch this video from the beginning until you understand how colors are formed. If you answered correctly, you've mastered a third of color theory. Congratulations! It might seem like the lesson is over, but that's not the case. It's just that human skin isn't paper. It's not that simple. It also has its own color and undertone. Moreover, there's an unimaginable number of these colors and shape. And even on one person's face, as you've noticed, there are many skin tones. In every area of the face, they're completely different colors. I divide clients into those who are obvious to me. Those are the very warm and the cool types. In everyone else, where I struggle to determine it, I categorize as conditionally neutral. How to determine this color type? In an editor, for example, you can do this on your phone or maybe on a computer by overlaying your client's photo on different backgrounds. For instance, on a warm one and a cool one. Warm could be some red, orange, a very warm peach color. Cool is all shades of blue, as you remember, from blue to deep lilac, any of them. You can also do this by applying the same principle, draping a warm or cool toned fabric over the client's shoulders close to the face so you can see how the skin looks against that fabric. And also by photographing the client against a warm or cool background. Maybe you can afford this in a studio where you'll actually have a background for your photos, a very warm red and some light blue, say closer to navy. And by placing the client against one background or another, you'll clearly understand their color type. Are they cool or warm? Because cool shades suit a cool color type and warm shades suit a warm one. They highlight the skin's best features and make the face look fresher and more beautiful. Or conversely, they highlight imperfections. Every spot, bruise, or vessel will stand out and become visible, and you'll know for sure that the color doesn't suit them. And if you have absolutely nothing at hand, you can simply examine the face without makeup. A warm client is when the hair has a yellow, golden, or warm, maybe red undertone. The skin has warm tones, peachy, golden. It's not like the whole face because, for example, under the eyes, it'll definitely be cooler. But generally, you look at large areas like the cheeks and the forehead. The irises range from warm to light tones and also have warm shades. Even green is a sort of yellow-green. Brown eyes are a warm brown without any coolness. And for cool color types, the hair has a cool undertone. It could be gray, a cool chestnut, or even a bluish black. The skin has a pinkish blue porcelain tone. A bluish tint may be gray-green, specifically when it's not yellow-green, but gray-green tones. And eyes range from steel gray to cool blue. And if they're dark eyes, they're a very cool brown, looking almost black because they're so dark. There's no tea or amber color present in those kinds of brown eyes. That's for high contrast types. If they start feeding you fluff about color types, like teaching you summer, winter, spring, how to identify them, exactly how they look, what suits them, you'll still get confused, and it'll just get more complicated. I couldn't find any clear, measurable definitions on how to determine with 100% certainty who's in front of you. With one teacher, for instance, you, specifically you, might be a spring. With another, you'll be an autumn. In different lighting or clothes, your color type will change for everyone, and I don't see the point. Focusing so much on color types, and there are many, four main ones, each divided into three more, and it's just a nightmare of confusion and a mess in your head. So why start studying something that won't help you anyway? So we're generally discarding color types and talking only about warm and cool clients, and we've just discussed them. So when choosing which color to work with, we look at the client's temperature, meaning their color type and their contrast. Whether it's high or soft, it's very simple, so I won't focus too much on that either. Basically, a high contrast client is when there's a big contrast between skin and hair, like very fair skin and very dark hair. And soft contrast is when everything is based on nuances and halftones. Usually, the client will still dictate their wishes, and when choosing a pigment, you'll try to match the eyebrow hairs and the hair on their head. So we're also going to touch on contrast only briefly. It's usually important for choosing clothes most of the time, but not in our case. Once we start working on the skin, and this is important, we have to consider not just its color, but its thickness too. And you must take this into account when choosing a pigment color. To put it simply, the thicker the client's skin or the deeper you apply the pigment, the cooler any color will ultimately look. Skin acts as an uneven filter through which light reaches the pigment. And the thicker and darker this filter is, the cooler the color underneath will appear. Look, this colored paper it roughly mimics various skin tones. It can be very different. And I'll show you how the same color, a simple brown, looks different on each of these colors. So here's the brown on white. The exact same brown on each of the colors. Looks a little bit different. So here I've applied it translucently, and the paper shows through my sheer color. You can see it distorts it. In our case, a layer of skin will sit on top of the pigment and distort it. So skin color is very important when selecting a pigment. And by the way, look, it's translucent on each paper and looks different. And if I apply the same color boldly and densely, meaning the contrast and density of the pigment application, it's very important. The same thing. Each of these colors, if applied boldly and with confidence, it looks completely different. And this should really help you to better understand application density in different situations, especially on various skin tones, especially if you're working on, say, African American skin, very dark tones, or Arabic, or some very dark Asian skin types. So if the pigment is applied translucently, it looks completely different. If the pigment is applied densely, contrasting with the skin, meaning the border is clearly visible, it's bright and noticeable, it also looks completely different. And on dark skin, you need to use a very warm pigment and apply it very boldly so that it's visible. And you should be able to see that the bold pigment, the exact same one, looks almost identical on every type, on every one of these colors. But when applied translucently, it changes its hue on every skin color as if adapting. So here it's yellow, here it has a greenish tint, and here it's practically red, which is borderline, nobody wants that color. On white paper, it's a neutral brown. So if you want minimal color distortion, and this is, by the way, a very common question, why I applied it beautifully in sheer, but it turned red. And if it is just a pigment with a red base, I will show you some colors on cotton pads now. If it is a pigment with a red base, a bright, warm red base, and you applied it sheerly, it might just look red on the skin because it is translucent. It needs to be applied densely. I have this thing here. I made it specifically for this video lesson. It is regular agar-agar, which, by the way, is very similar in color to skin at this concentration, so it becomes like a gel. I use it to film various lessons. And why did I make it? I am going to place it right over these skin colors and the pigment I have here. And you will see that the deeper the pigment lies, relatively speaking, because there is a thickness here, quite a bit actually, the cooler it looks. This is due to the Tyndall effect. You can Google it for more details and find out for yourself. Briefly, in simple terms, it means that our skin is a filter through which light rays pass and get distorted as they reflect off particles and irregularities in our structure in this filter. In this structure of ours, in this filter. And some of them are blocked, and the deeper, the thicker this filter is, the cooler, bluer, grayer the pigment looks, no matter what color it is, even pink on the lips actually. Not to mention bright, high contrast brown colors. So in this brown, there's actually a lot of blue. Look how much this color changes. Where its concentration is high, it looks straight up blue, even though you just saw it was brown. It is quite amazing, but every artist should know that the final result depends on the skin thickness and the depth of the pigment placement. The color changes. It is brown, a beautiful brown deep inside the skin, but we see it as distorted. Moreover, at different angles, when the light hits, it slightly changes its shade. In real life, it might look almost brown. In cool indoor lighting, for example, it might take on a somewhat purplish tint. In the sun, it will look like a warm brown. I can even show an even clearer example of this right now. It'll be even more striking if I take a very dark brown color. A very dark brown. Colors like this are sometimes used by artists. Look, on the tanned, the darkest paper, it looks like I see a gray-blue shade. On yellow paper, it also looks kind of muddy. Well, I cannot say it is brown. It's not brown everywhere. It might only look arguably brown on white paper. It is just more transparent than skin, actually. This thing I made, this layer here, imitating skin. But it's a really great example. How do you determine skin thickness? Well, it's the skin pinch. What is a skin pinch? This is a skin pinch. You do it right on the forehead, near the eyebrows. You can do it in two places, near the head of the brow and closer to the temple, because skin thickness varies a lot in these areas. Thick skin. The pinch can be 1/2 centimeter or thicker. Thick skin always has enlarged pores and increased oiliness. It's very easy to recognize thick skin. There are almost no wrinkles, even if it's an older client. And plus that shine, all those pores, it's all very clearly visible. Thin skin is also easy to see. The pinch is literally just a few millimeters. So, like, my skin is normal to average, it's not thin and it's not thick. And my pinch is also a few millimeters. But dry skin can be even less than 5 millimeters pinch, meaning it's very thin, the fold that gathers. Dryness. Density, meaning it's not loose, it's dense. Pores aren't enlarged, they might not even be there. Some skin just looks like paper. If the client is older, it's a fine wrinkle aging type with many tiny little wrinkles. Dry skin often has weak turgor. It's very difficult skin. You have to work very carefully on it. And then normal skin, normal combination skin, which is the majority. Pores might be slightly enlarged or not enlarged at all. The pinch is average, like mine, from about 4 millimeters. Up to 6 or 7 millimeters, especially around the head of the eyebrow. And this is the most common skin type. You should work on it at a medium depth with medium pressure. All eyebrow pigments can be divided into blonde shades and chestnut shades. Roughly speaking, blonde shades have a yellow base, meaning the yellow color is predominant and all blonde shades are lighter. Chestnut shades have a red base. They are brighter. Here's a table showing the main skin characteristics I use in my work and the main color types. Let's say cool, warm, and their contrast, because that's important when choosing a pigment. What else should you pay attention to? The darker the skin, the brighter and warmer the pigment should be, and the more densely it should be applied. There must be a contrast between the skin and the tattoo, obviously, so that your work is visible. The thicker the skin, the warmer the pigments you should choose from, those suitable for your client's type and contrast. Often pigments don't give the shades that we expect. They turn bluish-gray in the skin or maybe orange. How to test pigments and avoid mistakes. A drop of pigment on a wet cotton pad will create a haze. You can also mix, say, a couple of drops of pigment in a glass of water and look at the overall tone of the water in the glass. If you see purple, crimson, a cool crimson like that, lilac, green, you should work with such pigments with caution, maybe even with correctors right away. Before you start working with any pigments, study reviews about them. Find out how they behave after a year or more. What is the light fastness of warm shades? Simply put, do they turn red after 6 months or a year? About light fastness in Gimmer. Pigment light fastness is the rate of its degradation from ultraviolet rays. You've all probably noticed eyebrows, well, on friends, on clients who come to you, that are red, or conversely, a cool shade, some gray or even blue, possibly. Most often, this happens due to low light fastness of cool, or conversely, warm colors. You can only understand the light fastness of the pigments you're going to work with over time by tracking it on your clients. Ideally, you should read reviews about the pigments you're planning to work with. Of course, don't expect that by mixing pigments in water you'll understand how to work with them. Only by carefully studying the manufacturer's recommendations and using them with caution, tracking how each one heals in its pure form, will you begin to understand the pigments you'll be working with. You should take photos of the client in neutral light or in cool light at a fairly large distance so there isn't too much coolness in the face when you take the photo. Determine their type, whether they're cool or warm, and record which shade you actually worked with on the client. Describe how the procedure went. So if you went too deep, write about it. If you worked mostly on the surface, write about that too, because it all affects how the healed pigment will look in a month, 6 months, a year, and if you went deep, in 5 years. You just need to understand and track how the pigments you're going to work with will behave. Look at the touch-ups, how the color behaved, look at the refresh, collect data, analyze it, and no one will give you any simple absolute rules like that. That this pigment will behave exactly like this and not otherwise, because many factors that you influence affect how the pigment behaves in the skin. I'm wetting the cotton pads now, just getting them ready to show you. To help you understand, you can certainly use these cotton pads to try and determine the pigment's base. You'll see which ones are very warm or cool. I'll show you now. For example, this is our dark chestnut. Once the haze clears, it'll be much clearer to you. I'll work on the others for now. Knowing which base is light fast, warm, or cool, you must know this. You need to study how they behave after a year or 18 months before you start working with pigments, as there's a lot of information online. And so, for instance, if you know that red shades have poor light fastness, you can choose warmer ones, that is, consciously select warmer pigments for your clients. Warm means, say, a red base. It might scare someone during the process, but if I know it will break down fairly quickly, I can work with it. But if, for example, it's actually stable in this pigment, then I absolutely can't use it because it'll turn ginger, orange, or red in just 6 months. So be sure to study the properties of pigments, look them up online, or ask the manufacturers. And here, for example, is a yellow base. You can see it clearly. This one also has a yellow-orange base. This is a very warm pigment. Look here, a gray, sort of gray-green base, meaning it's a cool pigment and it's risky. With such a pigment, you should work either on warm skin or very superficially, or definitely with a corrector. To find out, well, this is one of the aqua colors. It's cool. Aqua often recommends using correctors. They have many of them. That's not about our pigments. This one also has a very warm base. See, it's like a yellow-orange haze, and there's a hint of green in it. Where there's a hint of green, it means there's always yellow in the mix. The base is yellow and actually quite safe. All these pigments with a red base are bright pigments, meaning they're for chestnut-haired clients. Most likely, you need to apply it densely so that this orange or red color doesn't come out after healing. So, of course, it's very interesting, and you can get a rough idea of the pigments you have, but you certainly can't say for sure that it will heal exactly as it looks on the cotton pad. If someone tells you that, well, after you soak it in the glass or on a cotton pad, it'll reveal the truth, and you'll know exactly which pigment suits which skin type. No, that's incorrect, because how the color looks will depend on many factors, including, as you saw in the previous experiment, the depth of application, the density of application, the technique you chose to use, and the light fastness of the pigments. That is, how they will look over time. As part of our distance learning courses you can take at home without traveling anywhere, without going to any conferences, or visiting those masters who, after attending 10 conferences, now gather people to teach them some secrets of color theory. In reality, it's all actually quite simple. I mean, you just need to understand. There's no need to go anywhere. Just understand and apply it right away. Draw, mix, observe. You can do all of this at home. So I recommend that, as part of our distance learning course, you understand, get all the lessons and study them at home. If you happen to be an experienced master, you'll find all of this very interesting and useful. Since you're watching this video, you have questions that haven't been answered yet. And if you're doubting whether you even need this or not, we have a test that will help you figure it out. Like whether you see symmetry or not, whether you can distinguish colors, cool, warm, and so on. Well, it's pretty cool and interesting. I developed it for those who haven't even realized yet if they need this distance learning course, let alone thinking about traveling somewhere. There will definitely be a link to it in the description of this video. You can take the test, and if you find it cool and interesting, and you're even good at it, then you can buy our Distance Master course and become a master, training right at home without leaving your city, without being away from your children, husband, or job, and without losing your current income, without traveling to another city and all that associated stress. I'm sure you'll do great. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.